My ex wants me back, but only for revenge, my journey of betrayal, guilt, an unexpected desire, the confession that shattered us. I never thought I'd be the one who cheats. In every movie, in every talk show, I'd see the partner who strayed and think, I could never do that. I prided myself on loyalty and honesty. Yet here I am, the villain in my own story, having torn apart my relationship through my own reckless choices. My name is Lana, I'm 26 years old, and until recently, I was in a committed 2-year relationship with Damon, age 28. We lived in a modest apartment in a bustling city, a place filled with shared routines, Sunday morning coffee runs, late-night Netflix binges, cooking experiments gone awry in our cramped kitchen. It felt like we were building a future, piece by piece. Then, about a month ago, I cheated on him. I can't even claim it was a drunken mistake or a spontaneous fling. It was premeditated enough that I can't hide behind excuses. I'd met someone at work, a coworker, or maybe more precisely a collaborator from another department. We had a spark. We started texting harmlessly, and in a matter of weeks, I found myself crossing lines I never believed I would. Damon was away for a weekend trip with his friends, and I ended up spending an evening out with this other man. One thing led to another, and I woke up consumed with guilt, with the horrifying realization that I'd destroyed something precious. When Damon found out, he discovered some suspicious texts on my phone. I had no choice but to confess. The look on his face gutted me. I saw betrayal etched in every angle of his expression, his eyes dimming like a light switched off. He didn't cry, didn't rage. He just stared at me for a long, silent moment before calmly telling me to pack my things. "We're done," he said, voice devoid of emotion. That finality nearly made me collapse. I sputtered apologies, desperate and guilt-ridden, but he stood firm. In fact, he was brutally cold about it. No tears, no yelling. He insisted I get out that same night. Part of me expected him to rage or melt down, but instead I faced an icy dismissal that stung more than any shouting match could. So I left with a suitcase, stumbling to a friend's cottage. I spent the next days in shock, tears streaming at random times. While brushing my teeth, while attempting to eat cereal, the heartbreak I felt was overshadowed by the knowledge that I was the cause of it. Usually the cheated on partner gets sympathy, and the cheater gets scorn. I had no illusions about my role. I was 100% in the wrong. I deserved his anger, deserved the consequences. So I decided to respect his boundary, no contact. For a month, we had zero communication. Damon's silence crushed me, but I told myself I had no right to demand anything from him. He'd been so final, so absolute in his words. "I don't want to see you, talk to you, or think about you," he said. That day he found out. "Go be with whoever you want." My friend Ella told me Damon was probably numb, or possibly furious, or maybe deeply heartbroken. She said to give him time, but I never expected the next development. The strange invitation, about a month later, out of the blue, Damon texted me, "Come over tonight." My phone screen lit up, and I nearly dropped it in surprise. After weeks of nothing, he was summoning me as if we'd parted on mild terms. My heart pounded. I typed back a hesitant, "You sure? How are you?" He didn't respond. Instead, half an hour later, my phone buzzed again. "Seriously, come over." No explanation, no courtesy, just a terse command. My mind raced. Could he want to talk things out? Is he having a breakdown? Part of me felt a guilty flicker of hope that maybe he missed me, maybe he wanted a tearful reconciliation. But the tone of his texts felt off. Too cold, too abrupt. I considered ignoring him. However, curiosity and lingering love got the better of me. So I went, my stomach twisted in knots. When I arrived at our old apartment, he'd stayed on the leas, while I was effectively exiled. He opened the door with a stone-faced expression. The interior looked dishevelled, half-lit. He wore a simple tee, sweats, hair slightly mussed. I stood at the threshold, uneasy, waiting for him to speak. Finally, he said, "Come in." I stepped inside, my heart pounding. He offered no small talk, no mention of "How are you?" Instead, he said something like, "So you're the one who messed around. I've been thinking maybe I want a piece of that too." I blinked, not quite grasping his meaning. "What do you mean?" I whispered. He smirked, a humorless grin. "I just want to have sex. You owe me that much." The bluntness shocked me. In that moment, I realized he had no intention of reconciling. He only wanted me physically, an act of revenge or some twisted sense of power. I stammered, That's not healthy." But he shrugged, leaning closer. I saw no heartbreak in his eyes, only a glint of something else. Resentment, maybe a desire to degrade me as I had betrayed him. He repeated, "You can make it up to me in bed. I want you, but I don't want you." I felt my stomach twist in revulsion. I tried to reason with him, telling him I was sorry for everything, that I never meant to hurt him. His expression remained cold, distant. He said, "Don't say sorry. Just do what I say." Tears pricked my eyes. I saw how messed up this was. I told him I couldn't do that I didn't want to be used as some revenge tool. I made an excuse about needing time. Then I left, unraveling the meaning I left that night in a daze, shock overshadowing me. I couldn't believe the man I once loved now treated me like a disposable object. I told Ella about the incident, how he demanded sex as if I owed it to him for my infidelity. She said it sounded like some twisted form of payback, or maybe an attempt to humiliate me. I recalled reading about hysterical bonding, a phenomenon where after cheating, the betrayed partner might crave sex with the cheater, but typically that includes sadness, longing, or a desperate attempt to reconnect. In Damon, I sensed none of that raw pain. He seemed almost too calm, too cold. The next day, he texted again, "Come over. We can keep it casual. I get sex, you get closure." I felt nauseous reading that. "Don't think that's closure," I responded. He insisted, "Trust me, it'll help me move on, and maybe you too." I recognized a manipulative streak. I tried ignoring him, hoping he'd back off. But the messages continued, each more insistent. "Stop playing games. I know you want it. Why pretend otherwise?" I was torn between guilt, because I had indeed hurt him, and a sense of self-protection. I found the entire proposition degrading, as if I was a tool to assuage his bruised ego. I also worried about his mental state. Was this a sign he was deeply messed up from the betrayal? Or was he always capable of such callousness? My guilt and confusion, I was in a precarious emotional spot. I still loathed myself for the cheating. I replayed that moment I slept with someone else, how I let curiosity or dissatisfaction overshadow loyalty. I recall how it seemed exciting in the moment, then immediate remorse flooded me afterward. I'd only told Damon the truth because he found suspicious evidence, but once confronted, I didn't lie or deflect. I came clean, tearfully, hoping we could fix things. I guess that was naive. I can't blame him for not wanting me in his life, but wanting me physically in such a cold, purely sexual manner was something I didn't anticipate. Some part of me wondered if I should just let him do it. Let him have his revenge sex, so maybe he'd find closure. But I also knew that I'd feel violated. I wanted to atone, but not at the cost of my dignity. Plus, how would that even help him heal from the betrayal? It might only complicate things. Maybe he was just hurting, stuck in a place of cynicism. I tried analyzing his behavior, Maybe he was testing me, seeing if I truly felt remorse enough to degrade myself for him. I was so confused. I turned to online forums, searching for stories of cheating aftermath. I found mention of some betrayed partners seeking purely physical payback. It made me uneasy, like I was living a twisted trope. Fleeting flashbacks of better times in the midst of this turmoil, I was haunted by memories of our earlier, happier days. I recalled how Damon and I took a spontaneous road trip last summer, singing along to radio hits, arms out the car window in the breeze. I remembered the time we danced in our tiny living room, celebrating my new job. I remembered the day he tearfully confided in me about childhood trauma, how I held him close and promised I'd never betray him. The irony of that last memory stung. I betrayed him, indeed. But did that justify his new behavior? I found it difficult to sleep. I'd wake from nightmares where I saw Damon's blank eyes ordering me to do his bidding. I'd jolt awake, heart pounding. I told Ella I was scared I might give in, might let him use me, because I felt I deserved punishment. I recognized that impulse wasn't healthy, that it could lead to more damage. She agreed, insisting I keep distance, maybe block his number. But a part of me craved some sense of forgiveness from him, even if twisted. I wrestled with that desire, worried I might do something I'd regret more. The second confrontation, about a week after I left his apartment that night, I got another text from him. "Why, I'm at home. Come over. I'm serious." I didn't reply. I tried to go about my day. Then I heard a knock on my door around 9 p.m. I hesitated, peeking through the peephole. It was Damon. I considered not answering, but I was curious. I opened the door, found him standing with hands in pockets, wearing an expression I couldn't read. "Somewhere between anger and indifference," he said. "You keep ignoring me, but I want you to come to my place. I'm not going to beg. I'm telling you how it is." I stepped aside to let him in, though I felt uneasy. I asked, "Why do you want me there? Is it to get back at me? Or do you want to talk about something real?" He shrugged. "You just want sex. You can call it revenge or closure or whatever. I don't care about definitions." I stared at him, tears threatening. "This is messed up. You realize that, right?" He gave a half smile. "Life's messed up. You did this." I felt a wave of guilt. He was partly right. I caused the initial betrayal by cheating, but I also knew two wrongs don't make a right. I told him as calmly as I could that I wasn't comfortable. I apologized again for my infidelity, telling him I understood how hurt he must be. But he just shook his head. "Don't talk about my hurt. I'm past that. I just want your body." It sounded so harsh, I physically recoiled. I told him to leave, my voice trembling. For a second, I thought he might lash out, but he just turned and walked away. In that moment, I realized any love or warmth he once felt might be gone, replaced by a desire to degrade me. Spiral of self-blame closing the door behind him. I sank to the floor, tears streaming. I hated what I'd done to him, but I also hated what he was doing to me now. I was the cheater, yes, but I still had feelings, a sense of dignity. I realized I needed help processing this. I decided to see a therapist. The weight of guilt, heartbreak, and his bizarre attempts to get me to sleep with him was too heavy to handle alone. In therapy, I explained the timeline of the cheating, the immediate breakup, and now the repeated requests for purely physical contact. My therapist asked how I felt about the possibility of giving in. I admitted I felt some twisted sense that I owed him, as if letting him do what he wanted might fix things or punish me enough to remove guilt. But logically, I knew that would only result in more emotional damage. The therapist validated that I had every right to refuse, that his approach was not a healthy way for him to cope. I left therapy feeling a bit stronger in my resolve. I did not want to indulge his destructive plan. Yet the guilt lingered. I replayed how I'd been unfaithful, how I broke my promise. I recognized that I'd do anything to fix the pain I caused. But letting him use me as a form of revenge, sex wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't mend the trust I shattered. I slowly accepted I might never get a chance to truly atone for my mistake in a constructive way with him. Sometimes we do irreparable harm, and we can't force the other person's forgiveness. The phone calls keep coming the following week. I got multiple missed calls from Damon, sometimes late at night. I rarely answered, but once I picked up around 11 p.m. "Why won't you come see me?" he demanded. I responded quietly that I didn't want a purely sexual encounter with no emotional context. He laughed bitterly. "You're the cheater, remember. I'm offering you a chance to do something for me. It's not like I'm forcing you." I felt coldness coil in my stomach. "It feels like you want me to degrade myself," I said, voice shaking. He said, "Maybe I do." Then silence. I eventually said goodbye and hung up. I realized how twisted his mind had become. Or maybe I was seeing his true nature for the first time. I recalled fleeting times in our relationship where he'd show controlling behavior, small acts of manipulation I brushed off. Now it was magnified. Ironically, if I had not cheated, I might never have seen this side of him. I could see how he might have always had a capacity for cruelty, but it was hidden until he had a reason to unleash it. Attempts to explain him away, part of me tried to rationalize. Maybe he's just deeply hurt, and this is his messed up way of coping. I considered going to him, trying to talk rationally, but each time I pictured the scenario, I felt nauseous. The last time we had any real conversation, he just repeated that he only wanted sex, no emotional entanglement. I couldn't subject myself to that. My best friend said, "You do not deserve to be used like that. No matter what you did, he can't treat you as an object." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "Still," I said, "I caused him real pain." "You did?" my friend replied, "but this is not how he should handle it." Another attempt at therapy, I told my therapist about the new developments, repeated calls, texts from Damon, implying I owed him. The therapist recommended I block him for my own mental well-being, or at least set firm boundaries. "He is not acting from a place of love or reconciliation," they said. "This is an exploitation of your guilt, a bid for revenge." Hearing that label stung, but it made sense. I found the courage that day to block him on all social media. I didn't block his phone at first, out of some lingering sense of responsibility, but I resolved not to respond if he called. For a brief period, I felt relief. No pings from him, no menacing requests. I started focusing on rebuilding my life. I was living in a small studio, separate from the old place we'd shared, making it cozy with new furniture, new decor. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during the relationship. I began, slowly, to see how I might move forward. Final confrontation and closure, of course. It wasn't over. About 2 weeks into my radio silence, Damon showed up unexpectedly at my building's entrance. I discovered him there when I returned from grocery shopping. I almost dropped my bags seeing him. He looked tense, a bit unkempt. "I thought you blocked me," he said. I nodded, silent. He demanded we talk. I told him I didn't want to. My doorman was watching from the lobby, sensing the tension. But I decided I wanted to close this out. I asked if he'd step aside with me to a nearby park bench. He followed me, carrying one of my grocery bags. I sat, stared at him. He opened with, "Why are you shutting me out?" I replied calmly, "Because what you're asking for is destructive. For me, for you. I cheated? Yes, but I'm not going to allow you to use me like an object just to satisfy a twisted revenge. He started to speak, but I pressed on. I know I hurt you, and I'm deeply sorry. I can't undo that. But I won't sacrifice my dignity to ease your anger. He said nothing at first, then muttered, "Guess that's that." I asked if he truly had no desire for an emotional reconciliation, or if he wanted therapy as a couple. He shrugged. "I don't trust you anymore. I can't see a future with you. I just wanted you physically to feel I was the one in control." Hearing that out loud cemented my decision. I stood up. "This conversation's over, Damon. I hope you find a healthier way to move on. But I'm done." I turned, left him on that bench. I didn't look back. Moving forward the day after that final talk, I felt oddly lighter. I realized I'd done everything I could. I apologized, tried to respect his boundaries, but I refused to degrade myself. Ironically, the cheating that started this entire saga remains my burden. I still regret it deeply. I do. But I no longer believe I have to endure his manipulative demands to atone. I learned I can be remorseful yet still value my own self-worth. In time, I see myself finding a new partner, someone I won't betray, someone who won't treat me like a plaything to punish. I'm learning from my mistakes. I also see that sometimes heartbreak reveals a person's true nature. I saw Damon's capacity for cruelty. Maybe I never would have glimpsed it if I hadn't cheated. That doesn't justify my wrongdoing, but it clarifies why we can't salvage the relationship. It's irreparably broken from both ends. 6 months have passed since that final confrontation. I've changed jobs, moved to a better apartment, re-established old friendships. I resumed therapy, focusing on self-compassion, acknowledging the reasons I cheated in the first place. Lack of communication, dissatisfaction I never voiced. I vow to never again let issues fester or to hurt someone that way. I keep Damon blocked. Occasionally, I hear from mutual acquaintances that he's single-moody. I have no interest in that drama. I quietly wish him healing. Perhaps one day he'll forgive me in his heart, or at least release his anger in a healthier way. But that's not my concern anymore. We're strangers now, passing on different roads. I share this story for anyone in a similar predicament. Someone who cheated and faced extreme or manipulative backlash. Yes, I caused the initial rift. But it's crucial to remember that no matter the reason, you do not deserve to be mistreated or coerced into sexual acts as punishment. We can be genuinely sorry for harming someone without forfeiting our right to dignity. I learned that the hard way. I hope anyone reading this sees that while cheating is undeniably harmful, revenge sex is not a path to real healing. I continue my life with caution, aware of how easy it is to slip into messy entanglements. I'm forging new habits, open communication, acknowledging problems in a relationship before they explode, preserving a sense of autonomy. I still wrestle with guilt, but each day I remind myself I'm human. I made mistakes, I apologized, I faced the fallout. I refuse to remain in a toxic loop. I choose to move forward. This is the story of how I found myself, a remorseful cheater, confronted by an ex who demanded I come back, but only in a destructive, emotionless way. It's a testament to how complicated heartbreak can be, how guilt can trap you into considering humiliating scenarios. But in the end, I realized I must hold on to what's left of my self-worth, draw boundaries, and find a healthier path on the other side of regret.